Welcome back to the Spector Creative channel, bringing you insights into the toy industry from someone who is both a collector and who's actually worked for the toy industry. My name's Toy Guru Neitlich. I'm your host and occasional berry picker, but today we're talking about chase figures, action figures that have caused us to look everywhere and are usually limited. Not chase, chase is in the verb, to chase. All right, I'm not going to get into a linguistics thing. We'll save that for Sunday mornings with Doodling with Purpose. But it's interesting to look at the rise and decline of chase figures over the last 20 years because it really has taken kind of a bell curve. Something that sort of revved up slowly and then became a huge part of the industry has declined. So let's take a look. What caused the rise and fall of the chase figure? Well, for starters, chase figures can be a good thing or a bad thing. In the example of this Pop Chase Audrey 2, when I ordered it, I actually got the chase version with the blood on the lips, and I didn't want that version, so I actually had to go through a whole thing and return it to get the regular version. And, hey, not everybody likes the chase version. They're not just going to, flip it for money. I wanted what I wanted. So there's ups and downs to getting chase figures. Usually they're more valuable because they're more limited in production, and sometimes they're a variant of a figure, and it could be a variant you want because it's got bloody lips or it's holding a certain gun or posed in a certain way, and it could be one that you don't want. Maybe you wanted the regular version, again, like I did with Audrey 2. One of the things, though, that chase figures does allow and was really prominent when they first started in things like Marvel Legend, which was a brand that really brought chase figures to the forefront of collecting, was it often allowed more characters. Like this version of Marvel was different from the other version of Captain Marvel. Or you could get a maskless Green Goblin with Harry Osborn's head holding a Green Lantern, wow. When you say one thing and mean your mother, Freudian slip, a Green Goblin mask in his hand. So the regular version, the mask was on his head and he had no alternate head. Other times they would add different things to the figures, like this Hulk figure with a ripped, tattered, soft goods shirt, which the regular version didn't have. Although I think this might have actually been an exclusive version for Walmart, but the point is, alternate versions, whether they were chase or exclusive to retailers, represented a way to get more toys out there, not just to give people something to chase. This infamous Doombot version of Doctor Doom was really hard to find, and you had to go everywhere or pay high bucks on the secondary market if you wanted this particular version. But without a chase figure, it wouldn't exist. This was a sales tactic and a production tactic that when I was the brand manager for DC Universe Classic, we also incorporated and basically lifted from what Marvel Legends was doing. So our classic Sinestro figure would also be released as a 50-50 with his modern Sinestro Core counterpart. And no comments from the Peanut Gallery about how this figure wound up being too short. You can see that addressed in the DCU Classics commentary video and how we eventually corrected that by getting out a taller version in the end, but that's not the subject of today's video. We're talking about how chase figures represent both the ability to get out more characters or more variants of a character, like these two versions we did of Booster Gold, as well as figures that will cause a collector or consumer to go to retail over and over, which is the point, which is what retailers want. So one of the most notorious chase figures when this trend started was this Wolverine figure. This was in Wave 2, Wave 3 of Marvel Legends. I'm sure it just said scrolling on the screen and I missed it. Either way, it was a very early figure, and the alternate version of Logan was him without his mask. He didn't come with swappable heads the way figures do nowadays. You got one head and one Wolverine body and one background scene with some Hellfire guards falling on the ground, which was actually pretty cool until we actually got real Hellfire guards. But that's not important right now. The point is, this version that was hard to find, that was the chase version, was going for big bucks on the aftermarket. In fact, I think I remember Toy Fair magazine rating it like the #1 figure of the month for almost a year. And it was going for $150 on eBay, just because it had a different head that was at a low production run. Fast forward to today, and this version of Wolverine, Tiger Stripe Wolverine, Jim Lee Wolverine, yellow outfit, animated outfit, whatever you want to call it, has been done quite a few times at this point. So back then, when that first Marvel Legends Wolverine came out, felt like it was kind of a one and done. This was our one chance to get a 6-inch, highly articulated Wolverine figure, and I want both, masked and unmasked. And again, fast forward today, and this figure is released by Hasbro all the time, most recently in a 3-pack with Gene and Scott, where you could get masked, unmasked, and battle-damaged heads that are all interchangeable. So you basically got that Chase figure in a set. So is this done just to drive collectors batty? Is it done just to get out more versions of characters that you couldn't otherwise do? What is the rationale and what are the logistics behind doing Chase figures from an industry standpoint? Well, I can tell you one big part of it is the retail component. So in DCU Classics, which I brand managed, we had a variant of Cyborg and Batman Beyond that were different from the regular release. Cyborg had a different arm attachment, and Batman Beyond got a maskless head and mask to hold in his hand, like that Green Goblin figure. These were only available at KB, and this was a way to drive people to retail. Now, sometimes when attempting to do variant figures, it can wind up sort of going haywire. The perfect example is the first wave of DCU Classics. We had planned to have a variant of Red Tornado. There was going to be 2 versions. One that would be a Chase figure at about 20 to 30% of the run, and the other version, this version, was going to be at about 70% of the run. Well, unfortunately, this figure suffered from what I call first wave syndrome, and you can see a link to that here, where I have a whole video about first wave syndrome, but essentially the variant modern Red Tornado, which is, you can see here from, well, my private collection, never made it to market. It did have package samples, and it was even shown at conventions, I think New York Toy Fair, or maybe even San Diego, but the point is it never got produced, because sometimes when you try to do too much, it just overloads the system. All right, so obviously, variants were really hot 10 to 15 years ago. And while some fans found it extremely frustrating and said, oh, it's just a different haircut on Aquaman, why should I search for this? But the nature of collect them all, of having every variant, would make people search this out, even if the change was as minimal as a different haircut, or in the case of Captain Atom here, it was just a paint job difference on the exact same tool, but still accurate to the comic book. He did have both a silver and gold look. So why are we doing this? To drive collectors batty? Well, again, like those KB examples, it's to drive collectors to retail, and more so to get retail to take a brand. Because by including a Chase program, when selling the line into retail, the manufacturer is able to say, hey, Mr. Retail, sales buyer, one of the reasons you should take this line is there are Chase variants. Some are 50-50, some are 70-30, some are 80-20, and it's going to get your customers to come back week after week looking for this version, and while they're in the store, odds are, and statistics show, they're going to walk out with $50 to $100 worth of stuff, scented candles, cheese graters, etc. Now, sometimes planned variants don't work. So in the case of Killer Moth here, we were going to do a variant of Killer Moth, and not just like this, where it's like a different outfit that he wore in the comics, but we were going to do a whole other form of him, in the form of Shiraxis, which is his giant mutated monster moth form. The Four Horsemen actually even sculpted this, and boy did it look badass. I wish I had an image of it. I searched all my archives and I could not find one, but yeah, they sculpted it. It was huge. It was like a Build-A-Figure. So unfortunately, we couldn't do it as a variant because it was just so much bigger. So that variant got killed. What about at conventions? So when you're not dealing with retail variants are done to get customers to go into those doors over and over again. But sometimes at conventions, and again, I'll use an example I worked on, the inaugural Masters of the Universe Classic figure, King Grayskull, is the only figure in Masters of the Universe Classics that ever had a variant, and that was the statue version. And no, I'm not counting the Spirit version, because that was just done for charity and to butter up upper management. But the two that were available to public was regular skin and statue versions. So same tool, different deco, and this was done to create publicity for the line. It was launching what ideally was going to be a brand new line. Maybe we'd get to 6 figures, maybe 12. Turned out it was 350, plus a play set and several vehicles. But it was going to generate PR, because convention and convention product gets picked up by both the sort of mainstream news and the fan press. So having a variant to talk about is something that a lot of media sites will now do a story on a figure simply because there's a variant. If there was no variant, they might not be interested in reporting it. So why aren't variants sold online? Like Matty Collector never had variants past King Grayskull. Well, it's because of interstate lottery laws. So if you have a figure that has a variant and you have a random chance of getting it and you're subscribed, meaning you're forced to get the figures, you can't have variants because it's considered an interstate lottery. So that was part of the reason that led to the death of variants, because when somebody is signed up for a year-long program to get figures, they have to know what they're getting. If it's random, well, then it becomes a lottery. All right. Now, the other reason is that they've kind of gone out of style. And by that I mean, trends come and go. The other reason is also MOQ. And I've talked about this in quite a few videos. MOQ is minimum order quantity, the number of units you have to order to get a vendor to produce it at a certain cost. The lower it is, the more the cost. Now, when we did DCU Classics, we definitely had some shenanigans, like when we had this Parademon that was shipped as a 50-50 variant, but was clearly two different figures. But we called them both Parademon, and they shipped in the same package, and somehow we got away with doing that. Eventually, the vendors started cracking down on this type of behavior, and you'll notice as the waves, as you got deeper and deeper, variants started appearing less and less until the final wave had no variants at all. So it was basically because of MOQ. The vendors were like, no, you cannot count both Parademons as the same figure in the same MOQ. They each need to have their own MOQ. So we kind of weren't able to really do that much longer once the vendors started realizing, not that they were being taken advantage of, but it was sort of a workaround over the MOQ rule. Now, it's interesting to note that Hasbro also found what I thought was a very interesting and clever workaround to this MOQ rule, was they started shipping Marvel Legends figures in packaging that wasn't labeled for the character. It was just themed, like Enemies of the Night or Deadly Foes of Spider-Man. And much like that Parademon example, they would ship two different figures in the same packaging, in the same SKU number, and call it a variant. So Darkhawk here wasn't called Darkhawk on package, much to my chagrin, who likes to keep his figures sometime in packaging when it's an all-time favorite character, but nope, it didn't say Darkhawk, it said like Masters of the Mind, and he was shipped in the same package as Vance from the Guardians of the Galaxy, and both of them appeared on the back of the package. So this was kind of a workaround for the MOQ, that you could do two different figures and have them count as the same MOQ, as opposed to each one needing its own MOQ. And Hasbro was able to do this for, honestly, quite a few years, where they had figures sharing the packaging, which meant they shared a SKU number, which is why you didn't see Carnage on the box. You saw Deadly Symbiotes, or whatever it is they used, that they could describe two different characters that were similar. So, here you have Skyline Sirens with both Spider-Girl and Black Cat as characters that had the same SKU number, same package, but clearly different figures. So eventually the system fought back. It was like, yeah, toy companies, you can't keep doing this. Those are two different figures. Just because you're calling them the same SKU number, they have their own MOQ. You can't split the MOQ like that, because it was hurting the vendors and they were losing money, because they have a lot of setup and a lot of cost when they are starting up a new line. And I should add, in no way were companies taking advantage of vendors. This was just sort of uncharted territory, doing this type of chase variant. And it was just a matter of time before the vendors and the manufacturers kind of caught up to speed and came together, realizing what they needed to do to ethically treat each other right, because no one wants to take advantage. But when it came to trying to count two different figures as the same MOQ, absolutely, toy companies respected that vendors basically had one response to this.
I don't think so, Tim.
So, a big reason, or many big reasons, why chase figures have kind of gone the way of the dinosaur. unless, of course, you consider dinosaurs still alive because of birds, but that's a whole other YouTube series. Now, Funko still does continue this. It's probably one of the only companies that does, but again, you're not locked into a subscription the way you were for Motu Classics, and you're told on things like Entertainment Earth you're going to get this or this, and you agree to that ahead of time. That's why that's not considered an interstate lottery. So, there are definitely, good times and bad times hunting down chase figures. Some of us loved it because it was part of the thrill of the hunt. Some of us hated it because we were completists and wanted everything. But in the end, it did give us more figures and more versions of characters. And that's kind of a silver lining, I think. For as much pain as chase figures caused, we got more characters and more toys this way. And that kind of makes me happy as a collector, because more is better.
Isn't it great that we're all better people?
So, if you have a giant toy collection, you really do have chase figures to thank for that, and even though they've come and gone, it was a really fun part of the industry while it lasts. There'll still be some companies that do it, but it's definitely had its heyday. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please do share with others, and let me know what you think in the comments below. I'll see you next time.